So, welcome, Steph, to the Good Girl Deprogramming podcast. I am absolutely delighted to have you on because you are one of those women that I almost have on a pedestal of, you're a proper badass.
Oh, don't do that. Don't put me on a pedestal.
No, but you're like, yes, this is, your career is really impressive and you get loads of stuff done. And yeah, so I admire you greatly.
Thank you. The feeling is mutual.
Thank
So
you.
there you go.
Oh. So I almost don't want to ask this question. So, did you ever identify as a good girl growing up?
Absolutely never. I've always been a bad. Yes, yeah. I mean, it's really interesting. I'm going to just drop in the fact that I'm writing a book, but and one of the things that when you're doing something like that, it does make you kind of reflect a little bit on your life. And I've got this lovely photograph of me, age 2, and I'm standing in my granddad's garden, and I am cocky as, I look like I'm about to give a speech. I'm full of confidence. And when I said to my mom, what was I like when I was 2? She said, boisterous. And she went, oh, no, not boisterous. And then I said, no, boisterous is a good description. She said, you were confident and just full of fun and curious, wanted to explore everything. So that was me as a little girl. I think about the age of 11 or 12, probably as I went into senior school, secondary school, that changed. And all of a sudden, I started to doubt who I was, whether I belonged. I always felt like I was on the outskirts of every group that I was in. So the way that I kind of tried to ingratiate myself was by just doing the things that I thought I was supposed to do. And kind of trying to, it sounds awful, but almost trying to ingratiate myself with the groups that I was in and make myself useful and be nice and be kind. And part of that was my upbringing. You've kind of had the normal stuff. I'm quite old, so the normal stuff that girls would get in the 70s and the 80s. But also, my dad is West African. So he had very clear views about how girls were brought up and how boys were brought up. And my mom actually pushed against that. So my brother had to do everything that we had to do around the house. But that messaging was still there. So, yeah, very much about just trying to make sure that people were happy with me. But interestingly, I was always a bit of a rebel as well. So I'm a massive feminist in my teens, and I would argue the toss with absolutely anybody. I mean, I would just argue anything about anything really. But my dad wanted me to be a lawyer because I could argue really well. But so I had all of that going on, but then just wanting to be liked. And the way that I was liked was by being as nice and as attractive to the group that I wanted to associate with as I possibly could. And that, I think that's probably been the bulk of my life has been in that phase of just trying to please people.
Yeah. And it's exhausting.
Oh, absolutely. Because you never do, or you never feel like you have. You never feel like you've done what you're supposed to do. I never felt like I had done enough. I never felt like I was good enough. I never felt like I was the right person for what I was doing. And that didn't matter whether it was my marriage, because I just like punishing myself. I married into a different culture, a very different culture. So being mixed heritage, Black, African, white, I married into a South Asian culture because why wouldn't you? So I was never going to really fit into that culture. And that, I mean, if you want to talk about being a good girl there, it probably helped that I didn't live in Leicester, which is where most of my in-laws were. But I was the best Indian daughter-in-law you could possibly get when I was with them. I was just so obedient and polite and kind of took all of that on because I just wanted them to like me. But in a work environment, constantly somebody asked me to do something. Yes, I'll do that. That's no problem. I'll sort that out. And just constantly taking on more and more and more work because I wanted to be of use, because I didn't want people to recognize that I shouldn't actually be there because I wasn't skilled enough to be there. So yeah, short answer, yes. I've I've been a good girl in the past.
So what changed? Because something must have changed for you to get to where you are now. Because you know, obviously you're lovely, but obviously you are hardworking and you don't take any shit, and you go for what you want. So what changed?
I do take a little bit occasionally. Um, I do pick my battles, but
Yes.
I think, well, it was a combination of things, if I'm honest. I think I got very ill probably about 9 years ago now, and I had a viral infection, and that led to a condition that I then had a brain hemorrhage. And when something like that happens, it was relatively minor. I don't have any massive side effects from it. I was really, really lucky. But it does make you kind of reassess a little bit. And the first thing that I did was get rid of the then boyfriend, because I'd kind of gone out of a marriage that wasn't great into a relationship that wasn't great, and just reenacted all of the things that I had there. So I sorted that out. And then I thought, well, that's fine. I've got rid of that. And I deliberately stayed single for 3 years because I thought I need to get my head in the right space from that perspective. But I went straight into, but nobody can think I'm less than I was because I've had this brain hemorrhage. And I just doubled down and did more. And 9 months later, almost had a breakdown because I was just putting myself under so much pressure. And it was that. I think it was the combination of having been physically really ill and then that brink of real mental illness, that I just thought, I've got a 11-year-old daughter here who relies on me for everything. I just can't be not here for her. And it was her that spurred me on initially to make a change. And it was then somebody had mentioned imposter syndrome to me probably about 15 years earlier, and I'd kind of gone, oh, and I'd looked into it and gone, oh, that looks like hard work to address. I just won't bother because it was about me, so it didn't matter. And I just thought, I need to do something about it. I need to get it under control because I wasn't achieving what I wanted to achieve. And I was making myself really, really ill by just trying to please everybody all the time. So yeah, it took some real action to get it under control. And I think it's definitely been that. If I'm really honest, I think I'm just sick and tired as well. I'm really, if I think back to that kind of 16-year-old who would argue with my brother about adverts on TV that were sexist, and he used to love winding me up. He still does, but he used to love winding me up about it. And I look back to mid-80s, and then I look at where we are now, and I just think, really, it's 30, 40 years later, and we're still going through this rubbish. Same with racism, same with homophobia, really. It's just like, I'm just sick and tired. Yes. It's like, and being nice has not got us anywhere.
No.
Thinking that we could make a really reasoned, polite argument and say, oh, excuse me, please recognize me. I'm here. I'm doing a good job. Look at this. And people go, oh, the scales have come off my eyes, and I now recognize that you're a wonderful, equal human being. It hasn't worked. So yeah, so I kind of give up. And I thought, I'm not going to put up with it anymore. And one of my superpowers is that I have some privilege in certain areas, and my position is one of them. So I'm going to use that. Being chief executive has its bonuses, and being able to say some stuff is one of those bonuses. So I'm just going to do it. Yeah. And the more I do it, the better it gets, and the easier it gets to just stop behaving.
Stop behaving. Love it.
In fact, I have one of my little lessons for people is to be a bit naughty.
Yeah.
And the first time I did that, I realized, I thought it was something that was earlier, was I had my nails painted. And I started off with a really neutral color. And then I thought, oh, I wonder if I went pink. So I did pink, and like the world didn't fall apart. And then I went green, and still people went, oh, I like your nails. And then I went orange. And So I started, because for me, colour is really important. I love colour. It's part of my heritage. I really like the way I look in colour. And so I then thought, oh, well, I'm getting away with it there. And working in the environment that I work in health, there's a kind of uniform that people wear. And I'm not talking about nurses' uniforms. It's that kind of, everybody wears business attire.
Yes.
Very muted. I mean, autumnal, it's not even autumnal. It's like, I describe it as it's like being in Kansas. It's like everything's grey. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to start wearing the colours that I like to wear. And it started off being muted tones of purple and things. And now it's like orange or red.
Yeah.
Wearing the red dress is my real naughtiness, because I was told, don't wear red.
Oh, you look wonderful in red.
But red's aggressive. You can't wear red.
It's just a bloody colour.
I know. I know. Yeah. I used to reserve it for Christmas Eve in the hospitals. I used to wear a red jacket on Christmas Eve because it was Christmassy, and I would wear that jacket once a year.
Oh.
But no, so that's my little, be naughty and do something that people kind of wouldn't do.
Yeah.
And when I do that, people actually really love that I'm being me and giving them license or permission to be themselves. So
yes, and it's so amazing that you at the sort of the top of the organization have that sort of the ripples and the trickles around, because so much, we hear, be authentically you in organizations, and then you look at who's sitting, on the board at the top of the organization and go, they're not being themselves, so clearly they're saying one thing and doing a different thing, so now I'm confused, what should I be doing?
And that's the thing of, that whole thing of, oh, you need to act professionally, and what's professionally? Well, it's not what we do. It's not. I mean, you're not allowed to laugh, you're not allowed to joke, you've got to be very kind of be really aware of, and don't get me wrong, you do need to be aware of boundaries, but it's actually in a lot of the contexts I've worked in, it's that hierarchical boundary that you have as well. And I can't be doing with that. It's just, I'm no more important than one of our housekeepers. In fact, I say this frequently to our housekeepers, if I'm not around for 2 months, some things would get difficult, but the place would still keep ticking over. It'd probably be about 2 months before somebody went, oh, where's Steph? But if they're not around, we have to shut within hours. So I'm not more important than them. I've got a different role. I hold more responsibility. And the book kind of stops with me, but I'm not more important than them. And that's really important that they recognize that. And when people say, oh, I didn't want to come and talk to you because, well, you're the chief exec, or I don't want to bother you, or somebody keeps saying to me, I'm really honored that you spent time with me. And I just say, I do go to the toilet like everybody else.
Yes, I'm a human.
Yeah. And there's a great picture that I saw in the toilets of a pub near me. And I've taken a picture of it because it's a picture of Supergirl sitting on the loo. And I just think that's the thing. Even Supergirl goes to the toilet. We're all the same. When it comes down to it, we are absolutely all the same. Whereas some people really like to maintain that distance and things. And I just think you don't get the best out of people in doing that. And it would be inauthentic to me to do that, because it's not what I believe and it's not the way I am as a person. So trying to pretend I'm so much better than everybody is just a nonsense, really.
Yeah. And it's isolating as well. So how many people do you see, the top of organizations, and they're like, I have to be stoic and I have to know all the answers, and I need to, you can imagine the sort of, and us witnessing those people, you can see the leakage, that they're not being themselves and they're winging it, and it takes away their credibility as well.
Yeah. And being in a position of leadership, particularly when you are something like a chief exec, is isolating enough as it is, because bearing in mind everything I've just said, no matter how much I try to be one of the gang, I'm still the chief exec. And I have to recognize that brings distance with it, that people won't feel as comfortable as they might do with their peers in terms of hierarchy. So that took me a little while to kind of get used to, was that, oh, okay, So yes, we all get on really well together and we all work together as a team, but there is a difference there. And that's just every chief exec I've spoken to feels exactly the same thing. And there are sometimes things that you don't share because actually there's no need to at the time, and it would just cause unnecessary concern or whatever. So there are sometimes times when you just have to, you've had a confidential conversation with your chair about something and you just have to hold that. So it can be incredibly isolating and lonely in that role. And you are carrying the responsibility for the entire organization. It's very much a team effort. And I'm not for a second saying I do everything, because I really don't. We would be absolutely screwed if I did. But actually, like I say, the buck stops with me. So there's all of that. But if I then added to that by being, and I'm going to keep my distance from you, that would just, I couldn't cope with that. That would just be awful.
You've got some really good sort of scaffolding around you. So you really believe in coaching and having that support as well. So you very much don't go it alone.
Oh, yeah, definitely not. And I think it's coaching is something that I've used kind of throughout a large part of, more so through my later career. I think I was offered a coach quite early on, and I don't think I really knew what that was, how to do it, or anything like that. And it was useful, but I wasn't ready for it. I think that's the thing with coaching as well. You've got to be ready for it. You've got to get the right person. And it was nice because I used to get a pep talk when I used to meet with them, but I don't think I got the most out of it. But it's where I was at the time. But I have had a number of coaches since then, and I've chosen coaches who are very, very different to me. So I've had a male coach, a white male coach, which was a really interesting experience for me. And I don't know that I'd do it again necessarily, because I don't think it's what I need now. But it was really useful to have that perspective of me and where I was. And actually, over the time that they worked with me, he turned around and he said, the people that you're talking with are thinking of you as the person that they knew when you used to work with them. And you're not that person anymore. You've moved on so much. So that was really interesting to have that reflection. Most recently, actually, I've had a couple of Black female coaches, and that's been first time ever. That's been a really, really valuable experience for me. The first one of the reasons that I approached this first coach was because I was stepping into the new job. And one of the things that I wanted to really explore was, it was a much higher profile chief exec role. So here I am as somebody who already had quite a bit of visibility in our area, but actually was going to have a lot more. And what did that mean to me as a Black woman, and how much of that did I want to bring to my role? And I started work on the 1st of May 2020, and 25 days later, George Floyd was killed. So kind of, I have said before, I didn't have a choice. I did have a choice. I could have just backed away from that completely and shut myself away. And some people did, and that was their choice to do that. But for me, it almost felt like, because of who I am, I didn't have a choice. I had to step forward. And it was kind of, the decision was made for me, what being a Black woman meant. And the fact that I then could use the voice and position that I had to help highlight some of the issues and things. So yeah, she kind of helped me through that process, and it was one of my objectives. And she kind of came back to it a year later, and she went, "Yeah, that's kind of not been." And we need to rephrase that objective a little bit, because it's not a kind of, it wasn't a should I, it's a how have I, and how do I cope with that. So yeah, coaching, I kind of say to anybody, find yourself a coach. I coach others, and it's just something that I think is a really helpful thing to have throughout your career, and different coaches for different points in your life, which I don't think I realized when I first started out having a coach, that you need different people for different things.
Absolutely. And it's as well, so good girls don't ask for help. So as soon as I kind of got over that bit, I think it was business coaching was acceptable, but it's that kind of more personal stuff. I've got like 4 coaches pretty much on the go at all times, depending on what I need help with, and it's that kind of support team, because it's a lot existing, isn't it? Existing is hard anyway.
And there's so much coming at us, I think, that we just, even if we don't want to engage with it, it affects us. And I think that's one of the things that for me with that feeling of not being good enough, the imposter phenomena, as I now call it. One of the things I've come to recognize is that absolutely some of that was internal. And it was about, me playing over tapes of what people had said to me and things like that, and taking all of that on. And I think there is probably a natural as well wariness about, which is probably about self-preservation, oh, I'm in this new environment and how do I fit in and stuff like, which is normal. Mine had just gone into hyperdrive. But also some of the me feeling like I didn't belong in situations was because people were not too subtly telling me that I didn't belong in that situation.
Exactly.
So even if you don't want to engage with some of the stuff that's going on, it still impacts on you, because if you're a reasonably sensitive person who can pick up on some non-verbal and some verbal cues sometimes, you know what people are telling you. And it's not because you're incompetent, and it's not because you did the wrong thing or anything like that. Not that doing the wrong thing is kind of a sackable offense, but it's because your face don't fit for some reason. And that happens far more than we think it does. That you just don't fit. And I think that for me, sometimes I haven't fitted an organization, but that's about me not being in a place that I want to be. The culture's not been right for me or whatever. That's one thing. But somebody taken against me because I'm female or because I'm Black is a whole different thing altogether. And we get that all the time.
It's interesting. I keep having these conversations about, let's do some leadership development for females. And it's kind of, it's like, but we can't keep developing women and then putting them back into contexts that don't work for them. So with an organization, we as humans, we made all of this stuff up. We created the culture, and it doesn't have to be this way. We can change it. So it's almost, I think my mission for 2025 is giving women the skills to go and change their own, and the community to change the cultures of the organizations they're in if they're not working for them.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I've been really fortunate to be on quite a few leadership programs, and I've learned stuff and met great people and all that type of thing. But there is very definitely a message that goes out, particularly when they are for women or for people of color or whatever, of this is what you have to do. This is how you have to change the way you behave to be accepted.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of, oh, okay. And at the time, because of where I was, I just took that on board. And I was kind of, I have to dress like this and I've got to do that and I must turn up on time and I must do. And then you look at the white guy next to you and they're always late for meetings and they look a mess and it's kind of, oh, so different rules then. And it still didn't get me on. It didn't get me any further. No. So, you have that thing of the leadership development stuff for women or for people of color is actually kind of focused at the wrong people.
Yep.
I kind of say now that if you're going to do something, you want to bring people into your organization who are different, then look at your organization first.
Yeah.
Because don't bring me into an organization if you're not ready for me.
No.
And that's not just Steph the Geordie with a tan. That's me and everything that I bring and all of my experience brings. And I will speak out if I think something's wrong, and I will challenge, and I will highlight that whilst you may not think that that is racist or sexist or whatever, it actually is, and I'll explain how. And I won't be nasty about it, but I'm not going to not say something that needs to be said because I'm worried about your feelings.
I love it. I love Steph in this era.
Well, I mean, I did a training just a couple of days ago, and I said to them, "Look, I'm really sorry, but you might feel uncomfortable at points in this." It was an EDI kind of
Yeah.
introduction type thing. So you may feel uncomfortable. And rather than going, "Oh, I feel uncomfortable about this," and getting defensive, I want you to sit with your discomfort and think,
Mhm.
why do I feel uncomfortable about that? Because there'll be learning in there. And it's not my responsibility to feel bad because you feel uncomfortable about me being me or me
Yeah.
pointing out a truth. I get that all the time. People will say something and it's about something that I've done or something that I enjoy. And they'll say something and I'm like, but I like that. It's a bit like when, when you find out that that person that you really liked is actually a criminal. And you're kind of like, oh, I can't listen to their music anymore, or I can't do this anymore.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
that kind of, but then I go, yeah, but actually that's just wrong. And I can give up that little bit of something that I liked or something that I didn't understand. I now understand, and therefore I'm not going to do it anymore.
Mm.
Um, rather than going, well, that's just rubbish, which is what you get a lot from people.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, it's so fascinating. Steph, I could talk to you all day, but I've got two last questions. So one, tell us about the book.
Yeah. So this is an interesting one. So people have said to me for a while, I should write a book. And I did actually try about 6 years ago and then just stopped. And then I heard somebody talking about a little book that they'd written, and it was a little book of whatever. And I thought, oh, I could do that. And it was about time for me because I
Mm.
really value my time now. So I have just finished the first draft. It is a little book of leadership lessons. That's what we're calling it at the moment. And it's basically, it's not my biography because my memory's not good enough
So I have no
to go
idea
back
what
that far.
happened.
No, it's
Yeah.
not an autobiography. But what I've done is I've gone through various experiences that I've had in leadership and then kind of done this is the lesson that I've drawn from that and just sharing it with people because it's what I do when I talk. It's, what I do when I'm kind of interacting with people all the time. And I just kind of think, well, if that makes people think, or if somebody can go, oh, that's me, and here are some things I can do to help with that, then it's been a worthwhile exercise for doing it. So, yeah, not
Exciting.
quite out yet, but soon, hopefully. And it will be a little book. It's less than 30,000 words at the moment. So it's a type of book you can read on the loo. I've talked about toilets a lot today, but
It's like
you can read a chapter on the toilet. It's that kind of book.
you put pictures in it as well.
Maybe not.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Brilliant. So I can't wait for that to come out. And then this last question is, as I always say, I don't want to change people's good girl conditioning with Steph's conditioning or Michelle's conditioning. So what I like to do at the end is get the guests to ask a question, something for our listeners slash watchers to think about. So do you have a question for the audience, Steph?
Yes, I do actually. I would say, what's your little bit naughty? So for me, the little bit naughty was wearing colour, and that was my opening of the door into not being a good girl. I'd
Mm.
like people just to kind of ask themselves what's their little bit of naughty, because it won't be the same as mine. But what's the thing that to them is, oh, that's breaking the rules, but it's doing it in a really soft and
Safe.
safe way.
Yeah.
It's like dipping your toes in the North Sea. It's that, oh, I can always kind of, if it all goes wrong, it's not a big go wrong. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I love it. I love it. I've got about 1,000 ideas for my little bit naughty. But I get away with so much more now. I work for myself, so it's quite nice. So thank you so much for your time, Steph. It's been so lovely catching up.
Yes, lovely to see you as always.